My name is Isabella Rodriguez, but everyone calls me Izzy. 3 years ago, I was dodging mortar fire in Kandahar Province using my hands to keep wounded Marines breathing until a medevac could reach us. Last Saturday, I stood in a designer bridesmaid dress while my own family questioned whether I'd ever really served at all. What happened next would change everything I thought I knew about honor, family, and the brotherhood that follows you home from war. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mountain air in Cedar Falls, Oregon, carried the scent of pine and fresh roses as guests began arriving at Riverside Gardens for what was supposed to be the perfect wedding weekend. My brother Marcus was marrying Vanessa Hayes. His college sweetheart and our entire extended family had traveled from across the Pacific Northwest to celebrate. The venue was stunning, perched on a bluff overlooking the Columbia River, with the Cascade Mountains providing a breathtaking backdrop. White tents dotted the manicured lawn, and strings of warm lights created an enchanted atmosphere as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. I had driven up from my apartment in Portland that Friday afternoon, my dress uniform hanging carefully in the back of my Honda Civic. After 3 tours as a combat medic with the Second Marine Expeditionary Force, I was finally home for good, trying to build a civilian life that still felt foreign to me. The transition had been harder than I'd expected. The VA had helped with college tuition, and I was halfway through a nursing program, but some days I still woke up listening for incoming artillery that would never come. My family had always been proud of my service, or so I thought. When I enlisted at 18, my father Vincent had driven me to the recruitment office himself, tears in his eyes as he told me how proud he was that his little girl wanted to serve her country. My mother Patricia had spent weeks before my deployment filling care packages with homemade cookies and pictures from home. Marcus had bragged to his friends about his baby sister the Marine, always asking for stories when I called from overseas. But something had shifted in the months since I'd been back. The conversations felt stilted, careful, as if they were walking on eggshells around me. When I mentioned my time in Afghanistan, my mother would quickly change the subject. My father seemed uncomfortable when I wore anything that indicated my military service. I assumed they were worried about me, concerned about the psychological toll of combat. I never imagined they doubted the truth of my experiences entirely. The rehearsal dinner was held in the venue's smaller pavilion, decorated with burlap and mason jars filled with wildflowers. About 60 people mingled over barbecue and local wine, the atmosphere relaxed and joyful. I sat at the family table, wearing a simple blue dress, making small talk with cousins I hadn't seen since my last leave. My Aunt Carmen, my father's sister and the unofficial matriarch of the Rodriguez clan, held court at the head of the table, regaling everyone with stories from Marcus and Vanessa's courtship. Everything seemed normal until Tommy Hayes, Vanessa's 22-year-old brother, arrived fashionably late with his girlfriend in tow. Tommy was fresh out of college with a business degree and an attitude that suggested the world owed him something. He'd grown up wealthy in Seattle, the son of a tech executive, and had never wanted for anything. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, his designer clothes impeccable, and his manner suggested he was doing everyone a favor by showing up. Tommy made his rounds, greeting family members with the kind of forced enthusiasm that comes with open-bar confidence. When he reached our table, he slapped Marcus on the back and kissed Vanessa's cheek before turning his attention to me. "So you must be the famous little sister," Tommy said, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone who thought he was being charming. "Marcus has told us all about you." "Nice to meet you, Tommy," I replied, extending my hand for a polite handshake. "Congratulations on tomorrow." Vanessa looks absolutely radiant. Tommy's grip lingered a moment too long, his eyes scanning me in a way that made my skin crawl. "So I hear you're some kind of war hero," he said, the word hero dripping with subtle mockery. "That must be exciting." The comment caught me off guard. There was something in his tone, a skepticism that felt deliberate. "I served 3 tours as a combat medic," I said simply. "Just did my job, right?" "Right," Tommy nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Afghanistan, right? That must have been intense. All those firefights and rescue missions Marcus talks about." I felt the table grow quiet around us. My family members were listening now, their conversations trailing off as they sensed tension in the air. "It was," I said carefully. "We saved a lot of lives over there." Tommy took a long sip of his bourbon, his eyes never leaving my face. "That's incredible," he said. "A tiny little thing like you, dragging wounded soldiers off battlefields. You must be stronger than you look." There it was, the challenge wrapped in false admiration. I'd encountered this before, people who couldn't reconcile my appearance with their ideas about combat veterans. At 5'4" with a slight build, I didn't fit their mental image of a warrior, but I'd learned to handle skepticism with grace. "Adrenaline is amazing," I said evenly. You'd be surprised what people can do when lives are on the line. Tommy laughed, a sound that carried across the pavilion. Oh, I'm sure. Hey, didn't you get some kind of medal? What was it called again? The question felt like a trap, but I couldn't see the teeth yet. The Navy Cross, I said quietly. It wasn't something I liked to discuss, especially not at social gatherings. The medal represented the worst day of my life, when everything had gone wrong and somehow I'd managed to keep 7 Marines alive through a 12-hour siege. The ceremony felt surreal, standing in dress blues while military brass praised my heroism. All I could think about were the 2 I hadn't been able to save. Tommy's eyebrows shot up in exaggerated surprise. The Navy Cross? Wow, that's like what? The second highest military decoration. That's huge, Izzy. Tell everyone what you did to earn it. The pavilion had grown significantly quieter now. Other guests were turning to listen, drawn by Tommy's theatrical tone. I felt exposed, trapped under the weight of their attention. This wasn't how these stories were meant to be told, not as dinner entertainment for people who had never heard gunfire outside of movies. I'd rather not, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not really appropriate dinner conversation. Tommy leaned back in his chair, his smile growing wider. Oh, come on, don't be modest. You're a war hero. People want to hear about your adventures. The word adventures hit me like a slap. Combat wasn't an adventure. It was survival, terror, and loss wrapped in moments of extraordinary courage born from desperation. But Tommy wasn't interested in the reality of war. He was building towards something, setting me up for a fall I still couldn't see coming. Tommy, Vanessa interjected, perhaps sensing the tension. Maybe we should. No, Tommy waved her off. I'm genuinely curious. See, my dad works in defense contracting, and he's always talking about military stuff. He says the Navy Cross is incredibly rare, like maybe a few hundred people have ever received it. And most of them are, you know, bigger guys, infantry types, special forces. It's just unusual for a medic to earn that level of recognition. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Around the table, I could see my family members exchanging glances. My mother's face had gone pale, and my father was staring down at his plate. Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as if he wanted to intervene but didn't know how. Medics serve with infantry units, I said, my voice tighter now. We go where they go, face the same danger. When people are wounded, someone has to reach them. Tommy nodded thoughtfully, as if he were genuinely considering my words. Absolutely, that makes total sense. It's just that my dad has this friend, who's a retired colonel, and when I mentioned my future sister-in-law was a Navy Cross recipient, he was really surprised, said he'd never heard of a combat medic named Rodriguez earning that decoration in recent years. The accusation hung unspoken, but clear. Around the table, the silence grew heavier. I felt my chest tighten, my heart rate increasing as if I were back in a firefight. But this wasn't enemy fire. This was something worse. This was my own family beginning to doubt me. Your dad's friend might not have access to all the records, I said, working to keep my voice level, especially if they're classified or ongoing operations. Tommy's smile turned predatory. Maybe, or maybe there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I mean, it's easy for stories to get exaggerated over time, right? A little medical training here, some dangerous situations there, and before you know it, family legend turns you into Rambo. The insult was delivered with such casual cruelty that it took my breath away. But what hurt more was the way my family received it. Instead of immediate outrage, instead of defending me, I saw uncertainty in their faces. They were actually considering whether Tommy might be right. My Aunt Carmen, who had been silent through the exchange, finally spoke up. Isabella, honey, she said gently, as if she were talking to a child caught in a lie. You know we love you no matter what. If you've been embellishing things a little bit, it's okay. We understand that coming home from the military can be hard. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own family, the people who were supposed to know me better than anyone, were entertaining the possibility that I had fabricated my entire military career. 3 years of my life, friends lost, wounds earned, medals given, all reduced to potential lies by a spoiled college kid they'd known for 2 days. I'm not embellishing anything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Every word I've told you is true. Tommy leaned forward, his expression faux sympathetic. Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but my dad's friend was pretty adamant. He said if there was a female Marine named Rodriguez, who'd earned the Navy Cross recently, he would have heard about it. And honestly, some of the stories Marcus has shared, they sound a little Hollywood. You know, I turned to look at my brother, hoping to see support in his eyes. Instead I saw doubt. Marcus, who had proudly introduced me as his war hero sister, was now studying my face as if seeing me for the first time. Marcus, I said, my voice breaking slightly, You know who I am, you know what I've done. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with his napkin. Izzy, I mean, you never really talked about the details before, and some of the stuff you mentioned, it does sound pretty intense for a medic. The ground seemed to be falling away beneath my feet. These were the people who had raised me, who had celebrated my achievements, who had welcomed me home with pride and gratitude. Now they were looking at me like I was a stranger, a fraud who had somehow fooled them all. Tommy sensed victory and pressed his advantage. Look, there's no shame in serving as a support role. Plenty of people work on bases, do important jobs that keep the military running. But let's be honest about what actually happened, okay? The whole Navy Cross thing, the combat missions, the dramatic rescue. It sounds like maybe you've been watching too many movies. The pavilion was dead silent now. Every conversation had stopped. Every eye was on our table. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their growing certainty that Tommy was right, and I was a liar. The worst part was seeing that doubt reflected in my own family's faces. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. Excuse me, I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. I need some air. As I walked away from the table, I heard Tommy's voice behind me, pitched loud enough for everyone to hear. Hey, I'm sorry if I upset her.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I just think it's important to be honest, especially at family gatherings. You know how it is with some veterans. Sometimes the stories get bigger every time they tell them. I made it to the edge of the pavilion before the tears started. Standing in the shadow of a massive Douglas fir, I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. I needed proof, documentation, something to show them that I wasn't the liar Tommy was painting me to be. But my medals were in a box in my apartment, my discharge papers filed away in a folder I rarely opened. I had never imagined I would need to prove my service to my own family. The sound of footsteps on gravel made me turn. My mother was approaching, her face creased with concern and something else I couldn't quite identify. Embarrassment maybe, or disappointment. Misha, she said softly, using the Spanish endearment from my childhood. Come back to the table. Don't let that boy upset you. He's calling me a liar, Mom, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. And you're all believing him. Patricia's silence spoke volumes. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. You raised me, I continued, my voice growing stronger with anger. You know who I am. You know I would never lie about something like this. How can you even question it? My mother's eyes filled with tears. It's just, some of the things you've told us. They're so dramatic, so scary, and you're so small, so gentle. It's hard to imagine you in those situations. So you think I made it all up? The deployment, the friends I lost, the nightmares I still have. I don't know what to think, she admitted, her voice breaking. That boy seems so sure, and his family knows about military things. Maybe you were there, but maybe the stories got mixed up somehow. The betrayal was complete. My own mother, who had sent me care packages filled with love, who had prayed for my safe return every night I was deployed, was now questioning whether any of it had been real. I turned away from her and walked toward the parking lot, my heels clicking against the pavement. Behind me I could hear the conversations resuming in the pavilion, voices discussing the drama that had just unfolded. By tomorrow the entire wedding would know that Marcus Rodriguez's little sister was probably a fraud who had lied about her military service. Sitting in my car I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed smaller somehow, diminished by doubt and accusation. For 3 years I had struggled with survivor's guilt, questioning whether I deserved the recognition I'd received. Now my own family was asking the same questions, and I wondered if maybe I had been lying to myself all along. But deep in my chest, beneath the hurt and humiliation, something else was stirring. Anger, pure and clean and righteous. I knew who I was, I knew what I had done, and I would be damned if I let some privileged college kid destroy the truth for his own entertainment. Tomorrow was the wedding, and I would be there. But I wouldn't be the same person who had walked into this rehearsal dinner. By the time this weekend was over, everyone would know exactly who Isabella Rodriguez really was. The question was whether my family would still be speaking to me when the dust settled. I barely slept that Friday night, tossing and turning in the cramped motel room I'd booked in downtown Cedar Falls. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Tommy's voice echoing through the pavilion, saw the doubt creeping across my family's faces like a shadow. By 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely and sat by the window, watching the sun rise over the mountains, while I tried to figure out how my life had unraveled so completely in the span of a single dinner conversation. The wedding was scheduled for 3 o'clock that afternoon, with photos beginning at noon. As a bridesmaid I was expected to be at the venue by 10 for hair and makeup with the rest of the bridal party. The thought of facing Vanessa and the other bridesmaids made my stomach clench. How much had Tommy told them? How much did they know about his accusations? I spent the morning in my motel room, pacing the worn carpet, and trying to reach anyone who could vouch for my service. But it was Saturday morning, and military offices were closed. The Veterans Affairs office wouldn't open until Monday. My old unit was deployed, scattered across the globe on missions I couldn't even ask about. The few Marine friends I kept in touch with were either unreachable or stationed in different time zones. When I finally arrived at Riverside Gardens, the venue was already bustling with activity. Florists were arranging centerpieces, caterers were setting up the reception area, and photographers were capturing the morning preparation. The beauty of the setting felt almost mocking now, all that perfection highlighting how wrong everything had gone. I found the bridal suite tucked into a converted cottage on the property, where Vanessa and her bridesmaids were already deep into their getting ready routine. The room smelled like hairspray and expensive perfume, filled with the chatter and laughter of women preparing for what should have been the happiest day of their lives. Izzy, Vanessa called out when I entered, her voice bright but strained. She was sitting in a chair surrounded by curling irons and makeup brushes, her dark hair pinned up in an elaborate style. I was wondering when you'd get here. We saved you a spot at the makeup station. The other bridesmaids looked up from their preparations, and I immediately sensed the shift in atmosphere. These were Vanessa's college friends and cousins, women who barely knew me but had clearly heard something. Their smiles were polite but guarded, their eyes curious in a way that made my skin crawl. "Sorry I'm late," I murmured, settling into the indicated chair. The makeup artist, a cheerful woman named Kelly, began working on my face with professional efficiency. In the mirror I could see the other women exchanging glances behind me. "So," said Rachel, one of Vanessa's sorority sisters, as she applied mascara with careful precision. "Tommy mentioned you served in the military. That must have been quite an experience." The comment was innocent enough, but the tone carried weight. I caught Vanessa's eyes in the mirror, and she quickly looked away. "It was," I replied simply, hoping to deflect further conversation. "What brand?" asked another bridesmaid, Stephanie, who was getting her nails touched up in the corner. "Marines." "Oh wow," Rachel continued, her voice taking on that same false sweetness I'd heard from Tommy. "Combat or support role?" There it was, the question that had become a loaded weapon over. I felt Kelly's hands pause in their work as she sensed the tension in the room. "Combat medic," I said, meeting Rachel's eyes in the mirror. "That sounds dangerous," Stephanie chimed in. "Were you actually in firefights and things like that?" I could feel the weight of their collective attention, the way they were hanging on my every word, waiting for me to say something that would confirm or deny whatever Tommy had told them. "Sometimes," I said carefully. Rachel's laugh was light and airy, but it carried an edge. "Tommy mentioned you have some pretty incredible stories. Medal of Honor, right?" "Navy Cross," I corrected automatically, then immediately regretted it. The correction sounded defensive, even to my own ears. Right, Rachel nodded. "That's amazing. I mean, you look so normal. You'd never guess you were a war hero just by looking at you." The backhanded compliment hit its mark. Around the room I could see the other women processing this information, weighing it against their own assumptions about what a decorated veteran should look like. Vanessa finally spoke up, her voice careful and diplomatic. "My brother can be a little intense sometimes. He asks a lot of questions." "It's fine," I said, though we all knew it wasn't. "People are curious about military service, especially when the stories are so dramatic," Rachel added, applying lipstick with deliberate precision. "I mean, saving multiple soldiers under fire, earning the Navy Cross. It sounds like something out of a movie." There was no mistaking the implication. These women, strangers who had known me for all of 12 hours, were openly questioning my credibility based on gossip from a man they'd known even less time. Kelly cleared her throat diplomatically. "All right, ladies, let's focus on making this bride beautiful for her big day, shall we?" The conversation shifted to safer topics like hair accessories and photography poses, but the damage was done. I sat in silence while Kelly finished my makeup, feeling more isolated than I had even in the mountains of Afghanistan. At least there I'd known who my enemies were. The morning stretched on with painful politeness. During the photo session I smiled on cue and posed with the rest of the bridal party, but I could feel the distance the other women were maintaining. They weren't overtly hostile, just cautious, as if they were afraid I might snap and reveal myself as the fraud they suspected me to be. Marcus found me during a break between photos, pulling me aside near the garden's rose arbor. My brother looked uncomfortable, his usually easy confidence replaced by nervous energy. "Izzy, we need to talk," he said, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. "About last night, about what Tommy said." What about? Marcus ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, messing up the photographer's work. Look, I know you served. I know you went to Afghanistan, but some of the details, they don't add up. I stared at my brother, the man who had once carried me on his shoulders, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework. What details, Marcus? The Navy Cross, for one thing. When you first mentioned it, you said it was for treating wounded soldiers during an ambush. But last month, you said it was for evacuating casualties from a helicopter crash. And before that, you said it was for holding a position while your unit was pinned down. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. The trauma of that day had been so overwhelming that I'd never been able to tell the complete story in one sitting. Different aspects would emerge at different times, depending on my emotional state and who was asking. To someone looking for inconsistencies, it would appear I was making things up as I went along. Marcus, it was all part of the same incident, I said desperately. It lasted 12 hours. Multiple things happened. But you never told us the whole story, he pressed. Every time we asked for details, you'd change the subject or give us pieces. It's like you couldn't keep track of what you'd already told us. Because it's hard to talk about, I snapped, my voice rising. Because every time I think about that day, I see the faces of the Marines I couldn't save. Because telling war stories for entertainment makes me sick to my stomach. Marcus stepped back, startled by my outburst. Izzy, calm down. I'm just trying to understand. No, you're trying to figure out if I'm lying. Just like everyone else. Tommy's dad made some calls, Marcus said quietly. He checked with his friend at the Pentagon. There's no record of an Isabella Rodriguez receiving the Navy Cross in the past 5 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. Is it, or is it possible that maybe you exaggerated things? Maybe you did serve, but not the way you told us. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You think I've been lying to you for 3 years? You think I faked a medal, faked my entire service record? I don't know what to think, Marcus admitted. But Tommy's family has connections. They know about military stuff, and when they can't find any record of what you're claiming. So you believe him over me? Your own sister? Marcus's silence was answer enough. I turned and walked away before he could see me cry, heading for the parking lot where I could break down in private. But there was no privacy to be found. As I reached my car, I spotted several wedding guests clustered near the entrance, their voices carrying across the parking lot. Never seen a Navy Cross recipient who looked like that. Marcus always talked her up, but now that you really think about it, my cousin served 3 tours in Iraq, and he says those stories don't sound right. Probably got some basic training and let her imagination run wild. They weren't even trying to keep their voices down. The speculation had spread through the wedding party like wildfire, turning me into the main topic of conversation on what should have been Marcus and Vanessa's special day. I sat in my car with the windows up, air conditioning running, trying to figure out what to do next. I could leave, drive back to Portland and let them have their wedding without the drama of my presence. But that would only confirm their suspicions, make me look guilty of the lies they were already convinced I'd told. My phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. Misha, where are you? The ceremony starts soon. Please come back. We can talk about this after the wedding. Talk about what? How I'd apparently fooled my entire family into believing I was something I wasn't. How I'd somehow convinced myself that my own memories were real. I thought about Colonel Morrison, my commanding officer, who had pinned the Navy Cross to my dress blues while cameras flashed and my parents beamed with pride. I thought about Sergeant Major Carter, who had recommended me for the decoration after watching me work through that endless night in Kandahar. I thought about the Marines whose lives I'd saved, who had sent me letters and Facebook messages thanking me for bringing them home. But none of them were here. None of them could speak for me now. All I had were my memories and a growing certainty that my own family would never believe them again. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. I could see guests streaming toward the outdoor chapel, dressed in their finest clothes, ready to celebrate love and new beginnings. Among them walked Tommy Hayes, resplendent in a tailored suit, accepting congratulations from relatives who praised him for bringing the truth to light. I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. If they wanted proof of who I was and what I'd done, I would give them proof they couldn't ignore. I started my car and drove toward town, heading for the one place in Cedar Falls where I might find what I needed. The American Legion Post was a modest building on Main Street, its brick facade decorated with flags and memorial plaques. Inside, I hoped to find records, contacts, someone who could verify my service before this wedding turned into a complete disaster. But as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw that the building was dark, locked up tight for the weekend. The Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall across the street was similarly closed. Every official avenue for proving my identity was blocked by bureaucracy and bad timing. I sat in the parking lot, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was dressed for a wedding, makeup perfect, hairstyled in an elegant updo, but her eyes were hollow, defeated, the confidence of a combat veteran replaced by the uncertainty of someone whose entire identity had been called into question. My phone rang, and I saw Marcus's name on the screen. For a moment I considered not answering, but something made me pick up. "Izzy, where are you? The wedding's about to start. I'm trying to find proof," I said, my voice flat, since my word isn't good enough anymore. "Look, just come back, okay? We'll figure this out later. Today is about Vanessa and me, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, today seems to be about whether your sister is a pathological liar." "Don't be dramatic," Marcus said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Dramatic?" I laughed bitterly. "You want dramatic, Marcus? How about this? Your future brother-in-law has convinced our entire family that I'm a fraud based on nothing but his own suspicions, and some phone calls to unnamed sources. And instead of defending me, instead of standing up for the sister you claim to love, you're all choosing to believe him." "Izzy, no, let me finish. I spent 3 years in hell, watching friends die, patching up wounded Marines, earning recognition I never wanted for doing things that still give me nightmares. And now I'm supposed to sit through your wedding reception while people whisper about what a liar I am." "Just come back," Marcus pleaded. "Please, we can work this out, can we? Because it seems like you've already made up your mind." I hung up without waiting for his response and drove back toward the venue. But I didn't go straight to the chapel. Instead, I parked at the far edge of the property and walked to a secluded overlook where I could see the ceremony without being seen. From my vantage point among the trees, I watched my brother marry the woman he loved. Vanessa looked radiant in her flowing white gown, Marcus handsome in his black tuxedo. Their families beamed as they exchanged vows, as they promised to love and honor each other for better or worse. I should have been standing with the other bridesmaids, holding Vanessa's bouquet, wiping away tears of joy. Instead, I was hidden in the shadows like a criminal, persona non grata at my own brother's wedding, because a spoiled rich kid had decided to make me his target. The ceremony concluded with cheers and applause as Marcus and Vanessa kissed for the first time as husband and wife. Guests began moving toward the reception area, chattering excitedly about the beautiful service and the party to come. I watched Tommy Hayes escort his parents toward the reception tent, basking in the attention he was receiving for his brave decision to expose me. People were shaking his hand, patting his back, treating him like a hero for revealing the truth about the fake veteran in their midst. The irony was almost unbearable. A man who had never served a day in his life, who had never faced anything more dangerous than a college exam, was being celebrated for his military expertise, while I stood accused of fabricating my entire identity. As the sun began to set over the Columbia River, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I made a decision that would either vindicate me completely, or destroy what was left of my relationship with my family forever. I pulled out my phone and began making calls. If they wanted proof of who I was, if they needed verification of my service, I would give them more than they bargained for. By tomorrow morning, everyone at this wedding would know exactly who Isabella Rodriguez really was. The question was whether they would be able to live with the truth once they learned it. The first call I made was to my old roommate from Camp Pendleton, Maria Santos, who was now stationed at Quantico. It went straight to voicemail. The second was to Danny Kowalski, a Marine I'd served with who had been medically discharged after losing his leg to an IED. His phone was disconnected. The third was to Staff Sergeant Jennifer Williams, my former squad leader, but her number had been changed. 3 years of civilian life had created a gulf between me and the people who could vouch for my service. Military personnel moved frequently, changed contact information, and often preferred to leave their war experiences in the past. The very nature of our brotherhood, built on shared trauma and classified experiences, made it difficult to maintain connections once we returned to the civilian world. But I wasn't giving up, not yet. I drove to a nearby coffee shop with reliable Wi-Fi and set up my laptop in a corner booth. If official channels were closed and personal contacts were unreachable, I would have to dig deeper into digital records and public databases. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was having to investigate my own life, searching for proof of experiences that were seared into my memory. I started with the Defense Department's public awards database, typing in my name and service dates. Nothing appeared. I tried variations of my name, different date ranges, even searched by unit designation. Still nothing. A cold dread began to settle in my stomach. How was it possible that there was no public record of my Navy Cross? Then I remembered something Colonel Morrison had explained during the medal ceremony. Certain awards, particularly those involving classified operations or sensitive locations, were often kept in restricted databases for security reasons. The public records only showed a fraction of military decorations, especially for personnel who had served in black operations or had ongoing security clearances. I shifted my search strategy, looking for any mention of my unit's deployment to Afghanistan. Again, I found almost nothing in public records. The Second Marine Expeditionary Force was mentioned in general terms, but specific operations, locations, and personnel were classified or redacted from public view. My phone buzzed with another call from Mark. I let it go to voicemail, then played back his message. Izzy, people are asking where you are. The reception is starting, and Vanessa's upset that her bridesmaid is missing. Whatever's going on, we need to handle it after tonight. Please just come back and we'll sort this out tomorrow. Sort it out tomorrow. As if my reputation, my identity, my entire relationship with my family was something that could be scheduled for a convenient time. As if I could sit through dinner and dancing while everyone whispered about what a fraud I was. I was about to close my laptop in frustration when I remembered Dr. Helen Winters, a family friend who had been at the rehearsal dinner. Dr. Winters was a retired Army colonel who now worked as a trauma surgeon at Portland Veterans Medical Center. She had served 2 tours in Iraq and would understand military culture in ways that Tommy Hayes never could. I found her contact information through the hospital directory and called her personal number, praying she would answer. Dr. Winters speaking. Winters, this is Isabella Rodriguez, Marcus's sister. We met last night at the rehearsal dinner. Oh yes, of course. How are you, dear? Shouldn't you be at the reception right now? I need your help, I said, cutting straight to the point. Someone has accused me of lying about my military service, and my family is starting to believe them. I need someone who understands how military records work to help me prove who I am. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's a serious accusation, Isabella. Who would suggest such a thing? Tommy Hayes, the bride's brother. He claims his father has connections at the Pentagon and that there's no record of me receiving the Navy Cross. Dr. Winters was quiet for a moment, and I could hear what sounded like music and conversation in the back. She was probably at the reception, watching my family celebrate while I sat alone in a coffee shop fighting for my reputation. Isabella, can you meet me tomorrow morning? There are some things I need to explain about military records that might help clarify this situation. Can't you just tell me now? I'm sitting here while everyone at my brother's wedding thinks I'm a liar. This isn't a conversation for a phone call. Meet me at the VA hospital in Portland tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll be in my office, and we can go through this properly. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone, feeling more alone than ever. Even Dr. Winters, a fellow veteran who should understand, was making me wait until tomorrow for answers. By then the damage would be complete. The wedding would be over, the family stories would be set in stone, and I would forever be known as Marcus's sister, who made up war stories for attention. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Saw you at the coffee shop. This is Tommy. We need to talk. My blood ran cold. He had been watching me, following me, turning my desperate search for proof into further evidence of guilt. I looked around the coffee shop, but didn't see him anywhere. The text was followed by another. Meet me in the parking lot behind the building. Come alone. Every instinct I'd developed in combat told me this was a trap, but I also knew I needed to face him directly. If Tommy had evidence that contradicted my claims, I needed to know what it was. If he was lying or mistaken, I needed to confront him before his accusations spread any further. I packed up my laptop and walked toward the back of the building, my heart pounding with the same rhythm I'd felt during patrol missions in Afghanistan. The parking lot was poorly lit, with only a few cars scattered around the asphalt. Tommy's BMW was parked near the dumpsters, and he was leaning against the driver's side door smoking a cigarette. Thanks for coming, he said as I approached, his voice carrying that same smug confidence I'd heard at dinner. I figured we should clear the air before this gets any more out of hand. What do you want, Tommy? He took a long drag of his cigarette and exhaled slowly. I want you to admit the truth. Stop embarrassing your family and just come clean about what really happened. I've told the truth. You're the one spreading lies. Tommy laughed, a sound that echoed off the surrounding buildings. Lies? I'm not the one claiming to be a war hero. I'm just asking questions that any reasonable person would ask. Based on what? Phone calls to unnamed sources, rumors from your father's friend. Based on facts, Tommy said, pulling out his phone. Want to see what real Navy Cross recipients look like? He showed me his screen, which displayed a military website with photos of recent medal recipients. All of them were men, most of them large and imposing. Exactly the kind of warriors that people expected to see earning the nation's second highest military decoration. Notice anything? Tommy asked. Notice how none of them look like you. Notice how they're all infantry, special forces, pilots. Notice how none of them are tiny little medics, who claim to have single-handedly saved multiple Marines under fire. That doesn't prove anything, I said, but I could hear the doubt creeping into my own voice. Doesn't it? Look, Isabella, I'm not trying to be cruel here. I think you probably did serve in the military. I think you probably went to Afghanistan and did your job. But somewhere along the way, reality became fantasy. Maybe you saw some dramatic things happen to other people and started imagining yourself as the hero. Maybe you heard stories from other Marines and started believing they were your stories. His words were delivered with such calm certainty that for a moment, I almost believed him myself. Had I somehow confused someone else's experiences with my own? Had my traumatic memories become jumbled, creating false narratives that felt real? The thing is, Tommy continued, it's not just hurting you, it's hurting your family. Marcus has been bragging about his war hero sister for years, and now he looks like an idiot. Your parents have been telling their friends about your medal, and now they're going to look like fools when the truth comes out. What truth? I demanded. That you're not who you pretend to be, that you're just a regular person, who served in a support role and let your imagination run wild. Tommy dropped his cigarette, and crushed it under his heel. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to that reception, and you're going to quietly let people know that maybe you exaggerated something. You're going to say you got caught up in the drama of war stories, and let things get out of hand. You're going to apologize to your family for embarrassing them. And if I don't, then I keep digging. My father has friends all over the Pentagon, and they're very interested in people who impersonate military heroes. There are laws against stolen valor, Isabella, federal crimes with serious penalties. The threat hung in the air between us like smoke. Tommy wasn't just questioning my stories anymore. He was threatening to have me prosecuted for fraud. You have until tomorrow morning to make this right, he continued. After that I start making official report. He got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing alone in the dark parking lot. The weight of his ultimatum pressed down on me like a physical force. Even if I could eventually prove my service record, the damage would be done. My family would never trust me again, and I would face federal investigation for crimes I hadn't committed. I drove back to my motel in a daze, my mind racing through options that all seemed to lead to disaster. I could disappear back to Portland, and never speak to my family again. I could confess to lies I hadn't told, destroying my own reputation to save them embarrassment. Or I could fight, even though I had no weapons and no ally. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, and called the one person I hadn't tried yet, Colonel James Morrison, my former commanding officer. It was nearly midnight, but Morrison had always told his Marines to call if they needed help, no matter the time or circumstances. The phone rang 6 times before his familiar gravelly voice answered. Morrison here. Sir, this is Isabella Rodriguez. I served under you in Afghanistan, 2nd MF. Rodriguez, hell yes, I remember you. Valkyrie right, how are you doing, Marine? The relief of hearing someone acknowledge my service, my call sign, my very existence as a Marine nearly brought me to tears. Sir, I need your help. Someone is claiming I never earned the Navy Cross, and my family is starting to believe them. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Son of a bitch, Morrison said finally. Let me guess. Some civilian is questioning military records they don't understand? Yes, sir. They're saying there's no public record of my decoration. Of course there isn't. That operation was classified 6 ways to Sunday. Half the personnel files from that deployment are still black-boxed. Who the hell is asking these questions? I explained the situation, Tommy's accusations, my family's growing doubt, and the threat of stolen valor charges. Morrison listened without interruption, and I could hear him getting angrier with each detail. This is horseshit, Rodriguez. Pure and simple, you earned that medal the hard way, and I was there when you did it. I wrote the recommendation myself. Can you help me prove it, sir? My family needs documentation they can see. Damn right I can help you. But not tonight. Military Records Department won't be open until Monday. What I can do is make some calls tomorrow, reach out to some of the Marines who were there that day. A few of them have gotten out and might be reachable. Sir, I need something by tomorrow morning. This guy is threatening to file federal charges. Morrison's voice turned ice cold. He's threatening what? Let me tell you something, Rodriguez. I've seen stolen valor cases, and they involve people who never served claiming they did. They don't involve decorated veterans being questioned by spoiled civilians who don't know their ass from their elbow. But what if he follows through? What if he convinces people I'm lying? Then we bury him under so much documentation he'll choke on it. But first, I need you to do something for me, Marine. I need you to remember who you are. You're not some civilian who has to justify herself to people who've never heard a shot fired in anger. You're a United States Marine who earned her stripes in combat. Act like it. His words hit me like a slap of cold water, reminding me of the confidence I'd once carried like armor. For the past 24 hours I'd been acting like a victim, begging for validation from people who had no right to judge me. But I wasn't a victim. I was a Marine. Yes, sir, I said, feeling my spine straighten for the first time since Friday night. Good. Now here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make some calls tonight. Wake up some people who owe me favors. By tomorrow afternoon, I'll have documentation that will shut this bastard up permanently. But you need to hold the line until then. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Outstanding. And Rodriguez, don't let some rich kid's power games make you forget what you've accomplished. You saved 7 Marines that day in Kandahar. 7 American lives that are breathing because of what you did. No one can take that away from you. No matter what lies they tell. After Morrison hung up, I felt something shift inside me. The shame and doubt that had been crushing me for the past day began to transform into something harder, cleaner. Anger. Not the hot, desperate anger of someone being falsely accused, but the cold, tactical anger of a Marine preparing for battle. Tommy Hayes wanted to play games with my reputation. Fine. But he was about to learn the difference between attacking a civilian and attacking a Marine. By tomorrow, everyone at that wedding would know exactly who they were dealing with. I spent the rest of the night planning my counterattack, reaching out to every contact I could find, following every lead that might provide documentation of my service. The hunt for proof had become a mission, and like every mission I'd ever undertaken, I intended to complete it successfully. The spoiled rich kid thought he could destroy me with phone calls and threats. He was about to discover that some fights are won not by those with the most connections, but by those with the most determination. And when it came to determination, he had picked the wrong Marine to mess with. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after mountain storms. I woke before dawn in my motel room, my internal clock still programmed to military time despite 3 years of civilian life. My phone showed 17 missed calls from family members and 12 text messages, ranging from concerned to angry to pleading. I ignored them all. Instead, I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, and drove to the VA hospital in Portland for my meeting with Dr. Winter. The drive gave me time to think, to plan, to prepare for what I suspected would be the most important conversation of my civilian life. Dr. Winters was waiting for me in her office, a spacious room overlooking the hospital's memorial garden. She was a small woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes that had seen too much, the kind of steady presence that commanded respect in operating rooms and briefing halls alike. Coffee was already brewing, and she gestured for me to sit in one of the comfortable chairs near her desk. Before we begin, she said, settling into her own chair, I want you to know that I left the wedding reception early last night specifically to prepare for this conversation. What happened to you at that rehearsal dinner was unconscionable. You believe, Isabella, I've spent 30 years in military medicine. I've seen every type of veteran, every kind of service record, every variety of trauma response. What that young man did to you was character assassination, pure and simple. Winters pulled out a thick folder and set it on the coffee table between us. I spent most of last night making phone calls to colleagues at Walter Reed, the Pentagon, and various veteran organizations. What I discovered should concern every service member in this country. She opened the folder to reveal printed emails, official documents, and what appeared to be screenshots of database searches. Tommy Hayes' father, Richard Hayes, does indeed have defense contracts with the Pentagon, but his security clearance was revoked 18 months ago for attempting to access classified personnel files without authorization. My stomach dropped. He was accessing files illegally, attempting to. The investigation found that he had been using his legitimate business access to probe deeper into military records than his clearance allowed. When confronted, he claimed he was doing background research for potential employees, but investigators suspected he was selling information to private military contractors, looking to recruit specific personnel. Dr. Winters pulled out another document. When his clearance was revoked, Richard Hayes was banned from accessing any military personnel databases. So when his son told you that his father had checked your records, he was either lying or admitting that his father had committed another federal crime. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Tommy's entire accusation was based on information his father couldn't legally access, and any claims about what was or wasn't in my file were fabricated. But there's more, Dr. Winters continued. I contacted a friend who works in military personnel records. Your file is flagged with the highest level of classification because of the sensitive nature of your deployment. The operation that earned you the Navy Cross involved rescuing personnel from a CIA black site that was under attack. The entire incident is buried so deep that even congressional oversight committees don't have access to the details. She pulled out what appeared to be an official memo. This is confirmation that your records exist but are classified at a level that requires presidential authorization to declassify. Anyone claiming they searched official databases and found nothing was either lying or looking in the wrong place. I felt a mixture of relief and rage washing over me. Relief that my service was documented and verifiable. Rage that I had been put through this ordeal based on fabricated evidence. So what do I do now? I asked. My family still thinks I'm a liar. Dr. Winters smiled grimly. Now we set a trap that will expose Tommy Hayes for exactly what he is. She explained her plan with the precision of a military operation. Using her connections at the VA and various veteran organizations, she had arranged for a special presentation at today's wedding reception. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential impact. I've contacted 3 Marines who served with you in Afghanistan, Dr. Winters said. They're driving up from California as we speak. I've also arranged for a representative from the Marine Corps headquarters to attend with official documentation of your service. They'll come to a wedding reception. They'll come to defend one of their own against false accusation. Isabella, what happened to you represents an attack on every veteran's service record. The Corps takes that very seriously. Dr. Winters handed me a secure phone. Colonel Morrison called this morning. He wants to speak with you. I dialed the number she provided, and Morrison's voice came through clear and strong. Rodriguez, how are you holding up? Better now, sir. Dr. Winters has been explaining the situation. Good. Listen carefully, Marine. I've been working the phones all night, and we've uncovered some interesting information about your accuser. Tommy Hayes has a history of this behavior. Sir, 3 months ago he made similar accusations against a veteran at his college. Claimed the man was lying about his service in a... Turns out Hayes had a grudge because the veteran had rejected his advances toward his girlfriend. The accusations were proven false, but not before they destroyed the veteran's reputation on campus. Morrison's voice hardened. This isn't about military records or stolen valor. This is about a spoiled rich kid who enjoys destroying people for sport. But he picked the wrong target this time. What can I do, sir? You can let us handle this the Marine way. Dr. Winters has arranged for some visitors to attend your brother's reception this afternoon. When they arrive, Tommy Hayes is going to get an education about what happens when you falsely accuse a decorated Marine. The plan was audacious and risky, but it felt right in a way that hiding or defending myself never had. Instead of continuing to react to Tommy's accusations, we would take the offensive and expose him publicly for the fraud he really was. I spent the rest of the morning preparing for what Dr. Winters called Operation Vindication. She drove me to a military surplus store where I purchased a crisp new dress uniform, identical to the one I had worn when receiving my Navy Cross. I hadn't worn dress blues since leaving the service, preferring to blend into civilian life, but today called for a different approach. At noon, I met with the 3 Marines who had driven up from Camp Pendleton. Sergeant First Class Miguel Santos, Corporal David Kim, and Lance Corporal Tyler Washington were all men I had served with in Afghanistan, men whose lives I had saved during that terrible 12-hour siege in Kandahar. Seeing them again, solid and real and wearing their own dress uniforms, felt like being reunited with family. Valkyrie, Santos said, using my old call sign as he embraced me. We heard some civilian was giving you trouble. Can't have that. You guys didn't have to come all this way, I said, though I was grateful beyond words that they had. Like hell we didn't, Kim replied. You saved our asses in that hellhole. Nobody questions your service without going through us first. Washington, the youngest of the group, grinned fiercely. Besides, it's been too long since we crashed a party. This is going to be fun. At 2 o'clock, we were joined by Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Reynolds, from Marine Corps headquarters in Washington. She carried a sealed briefcase and wore the kind of expression that suggested official business was being conducted. Miss Rodriguez, she said formally, I'm here representing the Commandant of the Marine Corps. We understand that your service record has been questioned by civilian parties. This will not stand. Gunnery Sergeant Reynolds opened her briefcase to reveal official documents, photographs from my medal ceremony, and what appeared to be classified files that had been partially declassified for this specific purpose. These documents prove beyond any doubt that you served with distinction and earned every honor you've been awarded. Anyone who continues to question your service after seeing this evidence will be demonstrating willful ignorance of documented facts. At 3:30, our convoy of vehicles pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Gardens. The wedding reception was in full swing, with guests enjoying cocktails and hors d'oeuvres on the lawn overlooking the Columbia River. I could see my family mingling with the other guests, all of them still unaware that their entire understanding of the weekend's events was about to be turned upside down. I had changed into my dress uniform in Dr. Winter's office, and the familiar weight of the fabric felt like armor. The blue jacket with its brass buttons, the red stripe down the trouser legs, the ribbons and medals arranged in perfect order across my chest, including the Navy Cross that had sparked this entire controversy. Looking in the mirror, I saw not the uncertain civilian who had been questioning her own memories, but United States Marine Isabella Rodriguez, decorated veteran and defender of the innocent. The other Marines formed up around me as we approached the reception area, our polished shoes clicking in unison against the stone pathway. Gunnery Sergeant Reynolds carried her briefcase with the bearing of someone delivering official business. Winters walked beside us, her medical credentials and veteran status lending additional authority to our group. The first person to notice our approach was a waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses. He stopped mid-stride, staring at our formation with obvious confusion. Then other guests began to turn, conversations trailing off as they tried to understand why a group of Marines in dress uniform was marching toward their wedding reception. I spotted Tommy Hayes near the bar, holding court with a group of guests who appeared to be hanging on his every word. He was probably regaling them with more stories about exposing my fraudulent claims, enjoying his role as the hero who had saved my family from embarrassment. Marcus saw us next, his face going pale as he recognized me in uniform. He started walking toward us, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning alarm. Izzy, what's going on? Why are you dressed like that? I stopped 10 feet from the main group of guests, my fellow Marines flanking me in perfect formation. The conversations around us died completely as everyone turned to stare at the unexpected military presence at their celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying the command authority I had learned in combat, I apologize for interrupting your celebration, but there are some matters that need to be addressed. Tommy Hayes pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with anger and what might have been. What the hell is this? You can't just show up here in costume and… Costume? Sergeant Santos stepped forward, his voice sharp with menace. Did this civilian just call a United States Marine dress uniform a costume? The crowd murmured uneasily as the tension ratcheted high. I could see my parents approaching, my mother's face etched with confusion and worry. Mr. Hayes, I said, my voice calm and professional. Yesterday you accused me of lying about my military service. You claimed your father had verified that my records don't exist and that my medals are fraudulent. I'm here to address those accusations directly. Gunnery Sergeant Reynolds stepped forward and opened her briefcase on a nearby cocktail table. I am Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Reynolds, representing the Commandant of the Marine Corps. I have here official documentation of Petty Officer Rodriguez's service record, including classified materials that have been partially declassified for this presentation. She pulled out a large photograph and held it up for everyone to see. It showed me in dress blue standing between two generals, one of whom was pinning the Navy Cross to my uniform while cameras flashed around us. This photograph was taken at the Pentagon on March 15, 3 years ago, during the presentation of the Navy Cross to then Corporal Isabella Rodriguez, for extraordinary heroism in combat operations in Afghanistan. The crowd pressed closer, straining to see the photograph. I could hear gasps and murmurs as people recognized me in the image, saw the official nature of the ceremony, realized the implications of what they were witnessing. Tommy's face had gone from flushed to ashen. That could be photoshopped, he said desperately. Anyone can fake pictures these days. Sergeant Santos pulled out his own phone and opened what appeared to be a military database. Sir, would you like to see the official Marine Corps website entry for Corporal Rodriguez's unit? Or perhaps the congressional record entry documenting her medal ceremony? Or maybe the Department of Defense press release announcing her decoration? Dr. Winters stepped forward with her own folder. Or we could discuss your father's revoked security clearance and his illegal attempts to access classified military records. I have the investigation reports right here. Tommy's mouth opened and closed without sound. Around him, the wedding guests were beginning to understand that they had witnessed a character assassination based on fabricated evidence. Marcus pushed through the crowd to stand directly in front of me. Izzy? Oh my God, what have we done? I looked at my brother, seeing the horror and shame in his eyes, as he realized how completely he had failed me. You believed a stranger over your own sister, I said quietly. You chose his word over mine. My father appeared beside Marcus, tears streaming down his face. Misha, we're so sorry. We were so wrong. Yes, I said simply. You were. Gunnery Sergeant Reynolds held up another document. Mr. Hayes, making false accusations against military personnel is a federal crime under Title 18 of the United States Code. Your lies have caused serious harm to a decorated veteran's reputation and family relationships. Tommy looked around desperately, seeking support from guests who were now staring at him with disgust and anger. I fought up eyes. I was just asking questions. Your father, Winters said coldly, is under federal investigation for illegally accessing military records. Any information he claimed to have about Miss Rodriguez's service was obtained through criminal means. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the Columbia River flowing past the bluff below. Tommy Hayes, who had been the center of attention for his heroic exposure of a fake veteran, now stood alone and exposed as the real fraud in their midst. But I wasn't finished yet. This wasn't just about clearing my name or humiliating my accuser. This was about ensuring that no other veteran would face what I had endured, and that my family would never forget the lesson they had learned this weekend. The trap had been sprung, but the most important part of the operation was yet to come. The silence stretched across the wedding reception like a held breath. Tommy Hayes stood frozen in the center of a circle of guests, his face cycling through expressions of panic, rage, and desperate calculation. The evidence of his lies lay spread across the cocktail table like an autopsy of his character, each document another nail in the coffin of his credibility. But I had learned something important during my years in combat. Victory isn't just about defeating your enemy, it's about ensuring they can never threaten anyone else again. Miss Hayes, I said, my voice carrying across the hushed crowd, you've spent the past 2 days destroying my reputation based on fabricated evidence. You've turned my own family against me and threatened me with federal prosecution for crimes I didn't commit. Before this matter is closed, I think everyone here deserves to understand exactly who you are and what you've done. Tommy's girlfriend, a blonde woman in an expensive sundress, tugged at his arm. Tommy, maybe we should just go, she whispered urgently. No, I said firmly. He doesn't get to run away. Not this time. Dr. Winters stepped forward with another folder. 3 months ago, Mr. Hayes made similar false accusations against a veteran named James Crawford at his university. Crawford was a decorated Army Ranger who had served 2 tours in Iraq. Hayes claimed Crawford was lying about his service, because Crawford had refused to let Hayes cheat off his exam in a military history class. The crowd murmured angrily as the pattern of Tommy's behavior became clear. This wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty. The accusations destroyed Crawford's reputation on campus, Dr. Winters continued. He was ostracized by classmates, investigated by university officials, and eventually transferred to another school to escape the harassment. Crawford attempted suicide 2 weeks after Hayes's accusations went public. Tommy's face had gone white as paper. I wasn't responsible for what he did to himself. Weren't you? Sergeant Santos stepped closer, his bulk casting a shadow over the smaller man. You destroyed a combat veteran's reputation with lies, just like you tried to do here. You think there are no consequences for that kind of evil? Marcus pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with disgust. Get out, he said to Tommy, his voice shaking with rage. Get out of my wedding right now. Marcus, wait. Vanessa appeared beside her new husband, tears streaming down her face. Tommy, how could you do this? Isabella is family now. How could you try to destroy her like this? Tommy looked around desperately for support, for anyone who might still believe his version of events. Instead, he found faces filled with anger, disgust, and shame. Wedding guests who had been congratulating him yesterday for exposing a fraud now stared at him like he was something they'd found stuck to their shoes. I was just asking questions, he said weakly. My father said, your father is a criminal, Gunnery Sergeant Reynolds interrupted coldly, and you are an accomplice to his crimes. Making false accusations against military personnel is a federal offense under multiple statutes. Attempting to intimidate a veteran with threats of prosecution is witness tampering. Accessing classified records through illegal means is espionage. She pulled out an official-looking document. This is a warrant for your father's arrest issued this morning by federal authorities. He's currently in FBI custody, facing charges that could result in 20 years in federal prison. The words hit Tommy like physical blows. His father, his source of authority and connections, was gone. The man whose influence had given Tommy the confidence to destroy other people's lives was now facing decades behind bars. As for you, Reynolds continued, you have approximately 30 seconds to leave this property before I have you arrested as an accessory to your father's crime. Tommy stumbled backward, his girlfriend already abandoning him and walking quickly toward the parking lot. This isn't over, he said desperately. You can't just... 25 seconds, Reynolds said, checking her watch. Tommy turned and ran, literally ran toward the parking lot like a child fleeing punishment. The sound of his footsteps faded into the distance, leaving behind only the murmur of shocked conversations and the distant sound of the Columbia River. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow, drained by the effort of proving my own existence to people who should have known me better than anyone. My mother approached tentatively, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Misha, she whispered, can you ever forgive us? I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had taught me right from wrong, who had somehow forgotten both lessons when faced with a smooth-talking stranger. I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know. We failed you, Marcus said, stepping up beside our mother. We failed you completely. There's no excuse for what we did. No, I agreed. There isn't. The conversations around us had resumed, but in hushed tones as guests tried to process what they had witnessed. Some approached the Marines who had come to my defense, thanking them for their service and asking about their experiences with me in Afghanistan. Others studied the official documents still spread across the cocktail table, seeing for themselves the irrefutable proof of my military career. Winters touched my elbow gently. How are you holding up? I'm tired, I admitted. This weekend has been exhausting. You could leave now, she suggested. You've proven your point. No one will ever question your service again. I considered her words, looking around at the reception that should have been a celebration of love and new beginnings. Instead, it had become a battlefield where I'd been forced to fight for my own identity. The thought of leaving, of walking away from my family and never looking back held real appeal, but as I watched my fellow Marines interacting with the wedding guests, I realized something important was happening. Sergeant Santos was talking to an elderly man who turned out to be a Vietnam veteran, sharing stories about their different wars and similar struggles with coming home. Corporal Kim was explaining to a group of younger guests what it really meant to serve in combat, dispelling Hollywood myths with hard-earned wisdom. Lance Corporal Washington was showing pictures on his phone to some children, images from medical missions in Afghanistan where we had treated local civilians alongside wounded Marines. These men had driven hundreds of miles to defend my honor, but they were doing something more important now. They were bridging the gap between military and civilian worlds, helping people understand what service really meant. Vanessa approached me, still in her wedding dress but with makeup smeared from crying. Isabella, I am so sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have stopped my brother before he hurt you. You didn't know, I said, though the words felt inadequate. I should have known. You're going to be my sister-in-law, and I let a bully destroy your reputation at my own wedding. She paused, collecting herself. Can I ask you something? Of course. Will you tell me about that day? The day you earned the Navy Cross? I want to understand what really happened. Not the Hollywood version Tommy was mocking, but the truth. I looked at Vanessa, seeing genuine curiosity and respect in her eye. For 3 years I had avoided talking about that day in detail, sharing only fragments when pressed. The memory was too painful, too complex, too wrapped up in trauma and loss for casual conversation. But maybe it was time. It wasn't heroic, I began, settling into a chair as Vanessa sat beside me. not the way people imagine heroism. It was terrifying and desperate, and mostly just trying to keep people alive long enough for help to arrive. As I spoke, others gathered around to listen. My parents, Marcus, Winters, wedding guests who had never heard a real war story told by someone who had lived it. I told them about the black site that came under attack, about the wounded CIA operatives and Marines who needed immediate medical attention while enemy fire poured in from 3 directions. I described the 12 hours of continuous combat, treating sucking chest wounds while bullets whined overhead, performing field surgery with shaking hands while mortars exploded close enough to shower us with debris. I talked about the 7 Marines I had kept alive through that endless night, and about the 2 I had lost despite everything I tried. The medal, I said quietly, represents the worst day of my life. Every time I look at it, I think about Corporal Martinez and Private First Class Johnson, the ones I couldn't save. That's why I don't like talking about it. That's why I keep the details to myself. It's not a story you tell at parties. The group around me had grown larger as I spoke, including several veterans who had been among the wedding guests. When I finished, the silence was different than before, not uncomfortable or shocked, but respectful, reverent even. An older man I didn't recognize stepped forward. "Miss, I'm Bill Henderson. I served in Vietnam and I want to thank you for sharing that. Too many people think war is like the movies. They need to hear the truth." A woman in her 50s approached next. "My son just enlisted in the army. Would you mind if I gave him your contact information? I think he could learn a lot from talking to you." More people followed, veterans and family members of service personnel, people whose understanding of military service had been shaped by fiction and propaganda rather than reality. They weren't asking for war stories or dramatic tales of heroism. They were seeking understanding, connection, the kind of honest conversation between military and civilian communities that rarely happens. As the afternoon wore on, the reception transformed from a celebration overshadowed by controversy into something deeper and more meaningful. The Marines who had come to defend me became ambassadors for all veterans, sharing experiences and perspectives that most civilians never hear. The incident with Tommy Hayes, while painful, had created an opportunity for genuine dialogue about service, sacrifice, and the challenges veterans face when they come home. Colonel Morrison arrived during the early evening, driving up from California in his personal vehicle. He was a big man with gray hair and intelligent eyes, wearing a suit that couldn't quite hide his military bearing. When he spotted me across the lawn, he smiled broadly and approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. "There's my Marine," he said, embracing me warmly. "How are you holding up, Rodriguez?" "Better now, sir. Thank you for everything you did to help." "Thank you? Hell, Marine, you saved my career once upon a time. This was the least I could do." Marcus approached nervously, clearly intimidated by Morrison's presence and authority. "Sir, I'm Marcus Rodriguez, Isabella's brother. I want to apologize for doubting her. We were completely wrong." Morrison studied my brother with the kind of penetrating stare that could reduce junior officers to stammering. "Son, let me tell you something about your sister. I've commanded thousands of Marines over 30 years of service. I've seen heroes and cowards, saints and sinners, and everything in between. Your sister is one of the finest Marines I've ever had the privilege to serve with." He gestured toward the group of Marines still mingling with wedding guests. "Those men drove 8 hours to be here because they know what she did for them. They know that without her, they wouldn't be alive today. When you questioned her service, you weren't just doubting her. You were doubting them, their memories, their gratitude." Marcus flinched under the verbal assault, but Morrison wasn't finished. "Your sister could have been bitter about what happened here. She could have written off her family and walked away. Instead, she used this opportunity to educate people about what military service really means. That tells me everything I need to know about her character, and it tells me something about yours too. Sir, I know we failed her. Is there anything we can do to make this right?" Morrison looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "That's not my call to make, son. That's between you and her." As the sun began to set over the Columbia River, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, I found myself standing at the edge of the reception area, looking out over the water. The day had been emotionally exhausting, but also strangely cleansing. The lies had been exposed, the truth had been revealed, and I had been publicly vindicated in front of everyone who had doubted me. Dr. Winters joined me at the Overlook, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "How are you feeling now that it's all over?" "Relieved," I said honestly, "but also sad. I keep thinking about how easily my own family believed I was lying." "What does that say about our relationship?" "It says they're human," Dr. Winters replied. "Humans make mistakes. sometimes terrible ones. The question is whether they can learn from those mistakes and do better. What would you do if your family had done this to you? Dr. Winters was quiet for a long moment, sipping her wine as she considered the question. I think I would give them the chance to earn back my trust. Not because they deserve it, but because family is too precious to throw away without trying to rebuild it. Even after something like this, especially after something like this, they've seen what their doubt and betrayal cost them. They've seen how close they came to losing you forever. Sometimes people need to face real consequences before they understand the value of what they've taken for granted. As if summoned by our conversation, my parents approached hesitantly. My father looked older than he had just days before, the stress and shame of the weekend etched in the lines around his eyes. My mother clutched a tissue in her hands, her face puffy from crying. Misha, my father said softly, we need to talk, all of us as a family. I looked at them, these people who had raised me, loved me, failed me and now sought forgiveness. Part of me wanted to make them suffer as I had suffered, to let them live with the consequences of their betrayal. But a larger part of me, the part that had been shaped by military service, in the bonds forged in combat, understood that some wounds could only heal through forgiveness. Okay, I said. Let's talk. We found a quiet corner of the reception area, where we could speak privately. Marcus and Vanessa joined us, along with my Aunt Carmen, who had been notably silent since the truth about Tommy's lies had been revealed. I want to understand, I began, how you could believe a stranger over your own daughter. Help me understand that. My father spoke first, his voice heavy with shame. We didn't want to believe him at first, but when he showed us things on his phone, articles about stolen valor cases, examples of people who had lied about their service, it planted seeds of doubt. And then, my mother continued, when we thought about some of the stories you'd told us, they seemed so dramatic, so intense. You're our little girl, and it was hard to imagine you in those situations. So you decided I was lying rather than accept that your little girl had grown up and done something extraordinary. Aunt Carmen finally spoke up. Misha, we were protecting ourselves. If your stories were true, it meant our baby had been in terrible danger, had seen horrible things. It was easier to believe they weren't real than to face what you had endured. The honesty of her admission was both hurtful and helpful. They hadn't just doubted my service. They had actively chosen to believe I was lying because the truth was too painful for them to accept. And when Tommy threatened to report me for stolen valor, I continued, when he said his father had proof I was lying, you were ready to believe that too. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. We panicked. The thought that you might be in legal trouble, that the family name might be damaged. We didn't handle it well. You threw me under the bus, I said bluntly. You were more concerned about your own embarrassment than about defending me. Yes, my father said simply, we did, and there's no excuse for that. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, painful but necessary. My family laid bare their failures, their fears, their shame at how completely they had betrayed my trust. They didn't try to justify their actions or minimize the damage they had caused. They simply acknowledged the truth and asked for forgiveness. When they were finished, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything they had said. Around us, the wedding reception continued, but our little corner felt isolated from the celebration. I need time, I said finally. I can't just forgive and forget what happened here. You need to understand that your actions had consequences, not just for me but for every veteran who might face similar accusations in the future. What can we do? Vanessa asked. How can we make this right? I looked at her, remembering that she had stood by silently while her brother destroyed my reputation, but I also remembered that she was young, that she had been caught in an impossible situation between her new family and her old one. You can learn from this, I said. You can remember what it felt like to realize you had been manipulated into betraying someone you loved. And the next time someone tries to turn you against family, you can remember this weekend and make a different choice. As the evening deepened and the reception began to wind down, I found myself surrounded by the Marines who had come to my defense. We stood together at the edge of the bluff, looking out over the Columbia River as lights began to twinkle in the distance. You did good today, Valkyrie, Sergeant Santos said, using my old call sign, not just with the family stuff, but with the civilians. You helped them understand what we're really about. It felt important, I admitted, not just clearing my name, but bridge building, helping people see past the stereotypes. That's what leaders do, Corporal Kim added. They take bad situations and turn them into opportunities to make things better. Lance Corporal Washington grinned. Plus, you got to see that rich boy run away like a scared rabbit. That was pretty satisfying. We laughed together, the easy camaraderie of people who had shared danger and survived to tell about it. These men had dropped everything to drive hundreds of miles just to defend my honor. They represented the best of what military service could create. Unbreakable bonds forged in shared sacrifice. Colonel Morrison joined our group, carrying a beer and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had seen justice served. "Rodriguez, I wanted to talk to you about your future," he said. "Have you given any thought to coming back to active duty, sir? The Corps could use more people like you, leaders who understand both combat and communication, people who can bridge the gap between military and civilian communities." I considered his words carefully. The idea of returning to military service held appeal, especially after the weekend's events had reminded me how much I valued the clarity and purpose of military life. "What kind of position are you thinking about, sir? Public affairs, maybe, or liaison work with veteran organizations, something that would let you use your combat experience and your communication skills to help other veterans." "Can I think about it? Of course, but don't think too long. Good Marines are hard to find, and you're one of the best." As the evening grew later, guests began to leave, thanking the Marines for their service and expressing their newfound understanding of what military service really meant. Several people asked for my contact information, wanting to connect with someone who could help them understand their own veteran family members better. Dr. Winters approached as I was saying goodbye to my fellow Marines. "Isabella, I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" "I've been thinking about starting a program at the VA hospital, something that connects combat veterans with civilian communities. Educational outreach, speaking engagements, that sort of thing. Would you be interested in helping me develop it?" The offer was intriguing. After years of struggling to find my place in civilian life, the events of this weekend had shown me that there was important work to be done in helping people understand the veteran experience. "It would be part-time to start," Dr. Winters continued. "Something you could do alongside your nursing program, but if it develops the way I think it might, it could become a full-time career helping other veterans tell their stories." "I'm interested," I said. "Very interested." As the Marines prepared to drive back to California, they gathered around me for final goodbyes. These men who had once depended on me to keep them alive in combat had returned that favor by helping me reclaim my life and reputation. "Stay in touch, Valkyrie," Santos said, embracing me. "And remember, if anyone ever gives you trouble again, you've got brothers who will come running." "Semper Fi," Kim added, using the Marine motto that meant always faithful. "Semper Fi," I replied, feeling the weight and comfort of belonging to something larger than myself. After they left, I stood alone on the bluff overlooking the Columbia River. The reception was over, the guests had departed, and the venue staff was cleaning up the remnants of what should have been a perfect wedding day. Instead, it had become something more complicated, but perhaps more meaningful. A day when truth triumphed over lies, when family bonds were tested and ultimately strengthened, when understanding bridged the gap between different worlds. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment I worried it might be Tommy Hayes making new threats, but the message was from someone named Crawford. "Dr. Winters gave me your number. I'm the veteran Tommy Hayes attacked at college. I wanted to thank you for stopping him. Maybe now other veterans won't have to go through what we did." I typed back, "We protect each other, that's what we do." His response came quickly. "Semper Fi, Marine." "Semper Fi," I replied. Marcus found me as I was preparing to leave, still standing at the edge of the bluff where the reception had taken place. My brother looked exhausted, emotionally drained by the events of the weekend. "Izzy, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but will you come to dinner next Sunday? Mom wants to cook your favorite meal, and we want to try to rebuild what we broke." I looked at my brother, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, the understanding of how completely he had failed me. "One dinner," I said. "We'll see how it goes." "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me yet. This is going to take time, Marcus. What happened here doesn't just go away because we all feel bad about it." "I know, but it's a start, right? It's a start." As I drove back to Portland that night, I thought about the strange turn my life had taken over the course of a single weekend. I had arrived at my brother's wedding as a struggling nursing student, trying to find her place in civilian life. I was leaving as someone who had rediscovered her sense of purpose and belonging. The false accusations that had seemed so devastating just days before had ultimately led to something positive. They had forced me to confront my own identity, to stand up for myself and for all veterans who faced similar challenges. They had connected me with other Marines and given me an opportunity to educate civilians about the reality of military service. Most importantly, They had shown me that there was important work to be done in bridging the gap between military and civilian communities. Too many veterans struggled with the transition home, feeling isolated and misunderstood. Too many civilians held misconceptions about military service based on Hollywood portrayals rather than reality. Dr. Winters's offer to help develop educational programs for veterans felt like exactly the kind of meaningful work I had been searching for. It would allow me to use my experiences in a positive way, helping other veterans tell their stories, and helping civilians understand the true nature of military service. 6 months later, I was working part-time for the VA while finishing my nursing degree, developing and leading workshops that brought veterans and civilians together for honest conversations about service, sacrifice, and coming home. The program had grown beyond our initial expectations, expanding to multiple cities and helping hundreds of veterans share their experiences with grateful civilian audience. Tommy Hayes had been convicted of multiple federal crimes related to his father's illegal activities, and sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. His father received 8 years for his role in accessing classified military records. The case had made national news, highlighting the problem of stolen valor accusations, and the importance of protecting veterans from false claims. My relationship with my family had slowly healed, though it would never be quite the same. We had all learned valuable lessons about trust, faith, and the importance of standing by the people you love even when circumstances seem to suggest otherwise. They had earned back my forgiveness through consistent actions rather than just words, proving their commitment to rebuilding what they had broken. The program Dr. Winters and I had developed eventually caught the attention of Marine Corps headquarters, and I was offered the position Colonel Morrison had mentioned at the wedding. I accepted, returning to active duty as a liaison officer specializing in veteran-civilian relations. My first assignment was to develop a nationwide program, bringing together veterans and civilian communities for educational events, speaking engagements, and community service projects. It was challenging work, but deeply rewarding, allowing me to use my combat experience and communication skills to help other veterans while educating the public about the reality of military service. The wedding that had almost destroyed my relationships with my family had ultimately led me to my true calling, helping other veterans tell their stories, and helping civilians understand the true cost and value of military service. What had seemed like the worst weekend of my life had become the foundation for the most meaningful work I had ever done. Standing in my new office at Marine Corps headquarters, looking at the photos on my wall from the various events our program had sponsored, I thought about how strange life could be. Sometimes the worst moments led to the best out. Sometimes the people who tried to destroy you ended up showing you exactly who you were meant to become. I was Isabella Rodriguez, United States Marine, decorated veteran, and defender of those who had served. No one would ever make me question that identity again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.